Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special on the road edition of Charts with Dan. I am out of town to see a couple of movies, Ballerina, which you're going to get a review for here on the channel tomorrow, and How to Train Your Dragon, which you're going to get next week. But the box office stops for no man, so let's take a look at the latest weekend's figures, and we'll start with the top 5 for May 30th to June 1st, where Lilo and Stitch remained the number one movie at the box office with $61.8 million, but a steep 57.7% drop, and that's over the 3-day number. That doesn't even include the Memorial Day number that would have been folded into the 4-day weekend last week. Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, almost an identical drop at 57.5%. It made $27.2 million in second place, and I was surprised that both of those movies dropped as much as they did, especially Lilo and Stitch, which is a family film. You think that it might hold just a little better, despite the fact that it did have such a great opening weekend, and it could open the door for another movie to come in and really challenge Lilo and Stitch for that number one spot at the summer box office. And we're going to break down Mission Impossible's performance a little bit more in just a few minutes. In second place was the debut of Karate Kid Legends, which brought in $20.3 million. Not an especially impressive number. The only thing that kind of mitigates that is the fact that it was reportedly made for about $45 million, so not a huge budgetary hurdle to clear there. Final Destination Bloodlines actually held pretty well in week 3, a 43.7% drop. It made $10.9 million. Its domestic total now at $111.8 million. A24's latest horror film, Bring Her Back, is in 5th place at just over $7 million. Coming in 6th was Sinners, which exits the top 5 in its 7th weekend, but it held well, a 38.9% drop, a $5.2 million weekend. And it's ahead of Thunderbolts, which is in 7th place in its 5th week of release. It dropped 50.6% for another $4.7 million. That $200 million mark, which would really be symbolic, if anything, is looking more and more difficult to achieve. We'll see if it's able to crawl its way there, as Captain America: Brave New World did. Friendship is in 8th place. It dropped 44.1% and brought in $2.5 million for the weekend. The Last Rodeo from Angel Studios, along with the other movies that came out over Memorial Day, had a steep drop, 60.2% for $2.1 million. And rounding out the top 10 is J-Hope Tour, Hope on the Stage in Japan, live viewing, starring the K-pop musician J-Hope, who I, as I mentioned last week, very much know and am familiar with. It made $939,000. Dropping out of the top 10 this weekend, we had a Minecraft movie, which was out after 8 weeks, The Accountant 2 out after 5 weeks, and Hurry Up Tomorrow ending really its disappointing run in the top 10 after just 2 weeks. And it should be noted that right now, Captain America: Brave New World, a Minecraft movie, and Dogman are all tied for the longest run in the top 10 for movies that were released in 2025 with 8 weeks. But Sinners, if it can stay in the top 10 for another weekend, will tie that with 8 weeks. If it can stay in the top 10 for 2 more weekends, it will have spent more time in the top 10 of any 2025 release. One of Them Days currently is tied for second with Sinners. It was also in the top 10 for 7 weeks. Looking at the biggest theater count changes this past weekend, Hurry Up Tomorrow pretty much fell completely out of release. It dropped 1,384 theaters. It's now in just 124. A Minecraft movie had by far its biggest theater loss. Not surprising considering that you can now watch it at home. It lost 1,263 theaters. It's now in 824. The Accountant 2 lost a bunch of theaters. It lost 1,182 of them. It's also out of wide release. It's in 820 theaters. Thunderbolts beginning to lose theaters in bigger numbers. It lost 660 of them. It's now in 2,520. And Sinners, which is really one of the older releases among this group, is still holding strong. It lost just 494 theaters. It's still in 2,138. Looking at what I like to call our road to recovery, the blue line is the box office average for 2015 to 2019. The red line is the box office average for 2021 to 2024. And the dotted black line is how we've been doing this year. And we did not match last weekend, where we were way above the average, even pre-COVID. But we matched it this past weekend. We were pretty much right at where we were prior to 2020. So this is a bit of a box office winning streak that we've been on. And let's see if we can keep it up going into the next weekend and then throughout June and the rest of the summer. So let's talk about some of the movies that are in the top 5, and we'll start with the number 1 movie in the US, which is Lilo and Stitch. And when we look at where it falls as far as Disney animated film remakes, and again, Alice in Wonderland is not here because it is more of a sequel / reimagining. Maleficent is here because it does directly remake parts of Sleeping Beauty. And Lilo and Stitch is already the 6th highest grossing Disney animated film remake at $278.9 million. It is about $20 million behind The Little Mermaid. It should reach that no problem. And then the question is, will it get up to about $370 million to get up above Aladdin and The Jungle Book? Right now, it looks like it might be a little hard pressed to get to that $500 million mark to hit where Beauty and the Beast and The Lion King are, but we'll see how it does in the upcoming weeks. I also wanted to talk a little bit about Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, because now that we have another movie, we can almost kind of backtrack and see if a theory about the last Mission Impossible film holds true. Remember, with Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1, which was the title at the time, people said that its legs were really cut out from under it because its second weekend was the same week that Barbenheimer opened and it lost most of its premium screens. But now that we have a new Mission Impossible movie, we can kind of put that to the test. So what I've done is compared Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning and Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning and how much they've made through 2 weekends. Now, what I basically did, because Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1 opened on a Wednesday, is I folded those first 2 days into basically the opening Friday through Sunday. So it looks like it had a bigger opening than it did on this graph. But really what I wanted to look at is, what do these 2 movies look like through 2 weekends? In the red there, you see Dead Reckoning, and the green is The Final Reckoning. And yes, you can see that on the second weekend of release, The Final Reckoning did pull slightly ahead of where we saw Dead Reckoning, but it's not way ahead. And so I'm going to keep tracking this. But initially, if you're talking about the second weekend of Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning being completely undercut by Barbenheimer, this kind of refutes it a little bit, because we had no such situation with The Final Reckoning. And it's essentially, especially if you were to account for the inflation over the past couple of years, flat with where we were with Dead Reckoning Part 1. So I think what we may be seeing more than anything is that the audience enthusiasm has cooled just a little bit for the Mission Impossible series, which is not good news because the budgets on those films have only kept growing. But so far, if Barbenheimer had really taken a lot of business away from Dead Reckoning that it would have gotten anyway, I think that we would have seen a bigger gulf between The Final Reckoning and Dead Reckoning Part 1. We're not seeing that right now. So if Barbenheimer was a factor in the performance of the last Mission Impossible movie, I think that maybe it was less of a factor than many people, including myself, may have thought. Let's take a look at the Karate Kid franchise, and I'm trying a new graphic format here for the franchise, so let me know what you think of this. These are the all-time domestic openings for Karate Kid films. The 2010 remake is at number 1. It opened to $55.6 million. People forget how well that movie did at the box office. Karate Kid Legends, though, currently has the second best opening in the franchise at $20.3 million. Karate Kid Part 2 is in third. Karate Kid Part 3 is in fourth. The original Karate Kid was more of a slow burner at the box office. It's in 5th place. And then we have the next Karate Kid way down in 6th place at $2.6 million. When you adjust for inflation, the 2010 remake is still number 1 at $81.8 million. But then we have the Karate Kid Part 2, which opened to an adjusted $37 million, followed by Part 3 at $26.8 million. Karate Kid Legends is in 4th place, adjusted for inflation. Then we have 1984's The Karate Kid at $15.5 million. And the next Karate Kid, this is going to be a trend, in last place at $5.6 million. And looking ahead to final domestic grosses, The Karate Kid 2010 is number 1, $176.5 million. The Karate Kid Part 2, the only other film unadjusted for inflation that broke that $100 million barrier, it's at $115.1 million. Then the original Karate Kid, again, like I said, it was a slow burner. That was a tough summer of 1984, so it had a lot of competition, but it wound up with $90.8 million. The Karate Kid Part 3 is at $38.7. Karate Kid Legends is already 5th, and the next Karate Kid is in last place at $8.7 million. And then just to kind of get a better idea of the road ahead for Karate Kid Legends, if you adjust those domestic grosses for inflation, the Karate Kid Part 2 is actually the highest grossing film in the franchise. It really built off the success of the first film, $336.9 million adjusted for inflation. Then we have the original at $280.3 million, but the remake from 2010 is not too far behind at $259.7 million. The Karate Kid Part 3 gets just over that $100 million mark adjusted for inflation, and you can really see the gulf here. Karate Kid Legends, I don't think is going to have a 5 times multiplier on its opening weekend, so it looks like it's going to be in 5th place. The good news is it's going to be ahead of the next Karate Kid in all aspects, because even adjusted for inflation, the next Karate Kid is still in last place. So this was not a number 1 opening film for Jackie Chan, but he has starred in some movies that did open number 1 at the domestic box office, and that's the trivia question this week. How many live action films starring Jackie Chan, voice roles don't count, have opened at number 1 at the domestic box office? I'll give you a minute to think about it. There's a few, I'd say 3 maybe, that are pretty easy to predict. But here we come. Here's the answer. The answer is 6. His first was Rumble in the Bronx, which opened number 1. Then we have Rush Hour 1, 2, and 3. The Forbidden Kingdom, which is a movie I had pretty much forgotten about completely, but that opened at number 1 back in, I believe, 2008. And then, of course, The Karate Kid back in 2010. So it's been about 15 years since Jackie Chan starred in a live action film that opened number 1 at the domestic box office. And Karate Kid is also behind this week's member poll question. We saw a few generations unite in Karate Kid Legends, so my question is, what franchise would you like to see a Legends installment of, where multiple generations come together to, well, if you're going by Karate Kid Legends, replicate the original film? If you're a member, you can vote now on the poll. It is live. You can leave your answer. If you see your answer there or one that you like, you can upvote that answer instead of leaving it separately. That makes it easier to tally everything. And the 5 choices with the most upvotes will be revealed next week. If you're not a member, you can check the description below to figure out how to become a member, or depending on how you're watching this video, there might be a button that you can hit to become a member a lot easier. And speaking of the member poll, last week I asked members which movie they think has the best shot of dethroning Lilo and Stitch for the biggest opening weekend of the summer, and there were a lot of different answers. The winner, according to the poll, and it was a clear winner, was Superman with 65 votes. In second place was actually no movie. 34 people thought that Lilo and Stitch is locked in already as the highest opening film of the summer. 20 people voted for Fantastic Four, The First Steps. How to Train Your Dragon was right behind with 19 votes, and Jurassic World Rebirth coming in a distant 5th place with only 6 votes. Returning to the top 10 movies, I just wanted to note a couple more things. First of all, Final Destination has cleared its final hurdle to become the top grossing film in franchise history. It already had that record unadjusted for inflation, but it is now the first Final Destination film to gross over $100 million, even when you do adjust for inflation. So it is the highest grossing film in the franchise without any asterisks whatsoever. Speaking of asterisks, Thunderbolts has been able to climb up a few spots on the all-time MCU domestic gross list. It's now at 30, above Captain America: The First Avenger, Ant-Man, and Thor. It's just behind Black Widow. And as I mentioned, we'll see if he can get to $200 million in order to get up over Captain America: Brave New World. But despite the reaction, the critical reception, the fan reception, this has just not been a breakout movie for Marvel, when arguably I think they probably needed one. Well, we are at the end of the month, which means it's time to catch up on a few different charts. We're going to look at the cumulative box office for 2025 so far, as well as the market share, which studios have sold the most tickets this year. And let's look first at the cumulative box office for the year so far. First of all, this is where we were at the end of April, which was a good month at the box office. We'd seen some recovery. We were about $200 million ahead of 2024's pace and a little less than $400 million off of 2023's pace. Well, after a successful May box office month, this is where we are right now, and it's really an improvement all around. We're now almost $700 million ahead of 2024's pace, and keep in mind, we were behind the pace just a couple months ago, and we're only $130 million behind 2023's pace. In fact, we had the best May at the box office since 2019, so Hollywood went really cold at the beginning of the year, but they're picking up some momentum here in the summer season. And let's look now at the market share. This is where we were at the end of April. Warner Brothers had a slim lead over Disney for selling the most tickets so far this year at 26% of tickets sold since January 1. This includes carryover releases from 2024. Disney was right behind at 24.78%. Well, after the month of May, Disney has regained the lead, and it's a lead of about 5% with 31.87% of the total market share. Warner Brothers is still doing well at 26.47%. Together, those two studios control about 58% of the total box office to date. Paramount and Sony basically switched places at 7 and 6% roughly. Universal's at 9.47%. All other studios are at 13%, and Amazon and Lionsgate continue to be non-factors. Universal is going to look to make a big move in June with How to Train Your Dragon as well as Megan 2.0. Disney has Elio, Sony has 28 Years Later, and Warner Brothers closes out June with F1. So that's what's going on at the domestic box office. Let's take a look at the international picture, at the films that were playing outside of the US and Canada. And Lilo and Stitch remained the number one movie internationally at $113.1 million. Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning remains in second place at $76.1 million. Then we had Final Destination: Bloodlines at $14.4 million. Karate Kid Legends at $12 million. It opened in some markets early, but it opened in more markets this past weekend. And then the Chinese film Endless Journey of Love, which is an animated film, rounds out the top five at $7.2 million. When you take those international grosses, you combine them with our domestic grosses, we get our top five films worldwide. And Lilo and Stitch had a much better drop when you look at the worldwide numbers. It dropped just 42.1% to bring in another $176.1 million. Its worldwide total is now over $600 million. Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning also fared better despite having some international grosses rolled into its opening weekend. It dropped just 45.6% for another $103.4 million. And a $353.8 million worldwide total. Karate Kid Legends brought in $33 million. When you add it to what it had already made, it's at $47 million worldwide. Final Destination: Bloodlines brought in another $25.2 million. It's now at $229.3 million worldwide. And then Bring Her Back brought in about $8 million worldwide, which heavily consisted of its domestic opening weekend. When we look at the Disney animated film remake grosses as far as worldwide totals, The Lion King, Beauty and the Beast, and Aladdin are the three remakes that have breached the $1 billion barrier. The Jungle Book is in fourth place at $951.8 million, and then Maleficent is in fifth place. It did very well around the world at $758.5 million. Lilo and Stitch is at number 6 on the worldwide list as well at $610.8 million. It has passed The Little Mermaid, Cinderella, Dumbo, and the 1996 version of 101 Dalmatians starring Glenn Close, which actually made over $300 million worldwide. That was a very successful film. Also, similarly to the domestic list we looked at before, I just wanted to note that Final Destination has also become the highest grossing film in franchise history at $229.3 million, the only film so far to make over $200 million. So this is an unqualified success for Warner Brothers. Let's take a look now at what I like to call some of our specialty charts, and we will start with the biggest per theater averages for this past weekend. And Wes Anderson, as we often see when his movies open in very small release, dominated this chart with The Phoenician Scheme. It opened in just 6 theaters. It'll be opening in many more theaters this weekend and brought in $93,417 per theater. That's below what some movies like Asteroid City have made, but still the highest, as we'll see in a minute, per theater average of the year so far. You can find my review of that movie on the channel right now. Lilo and Stitch came in second place, bringing in just over $14,000 per theater. Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning brought in about $7,000 per theater. Karate Kid Legends bringing in about $5,300 per theater on average. And Final Destination: Bloodlines rounding out the top 5 at about $3,400 per theater. And as I mentioned, The Phoenician Scheme with the best per theater average of the year so far, $93,417 in 6 theaters. That moves The Encampments down to number 2 and beat its total by about $17,000. So it's a pretty handy win here for The Phoenician Scheme. The opening weekend of Friendship in 6 theaters is in third place. Secret Mall Apartment in just 1 theater is in fourth. And Extremely Unique Dynamic, which also played in just 1 theater back in January, drops down to 5th. Looking at the top films in limited release, which I define as 1,000 theaters or fewer, at number 1 was the J-Hope Tour, which brought in $939,000. Then we had one of the live streams from the Met Opera playing The Barber of Seville, which brought in over $900,000 in about 700 theaters. Peppa Meets the Baby Cinema Experience, starring Peppa Pig, played in 428 theaters and brought in just under $700,000, so a big family audience showing up for that film. The Phoenician Scheme, in just 6 theaters, is at number 4 at $560,000, and Jane Austen Wrecked My Life had a big expansion to 526 theaters and brought in $529,000. This is the domestic summer box office so far. Lilo and Stitch and Thunderbolts remain the top 2 films of the summer as of right now. Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning moves up to number 3. Final Destination: Bloodlines moves down to number 4. Karate Kid Legends debuts on the list at number 5. Friendship drops down to 6th place. The Last Rodeo remains in 7th place. Clown in a Cornfield drops down 2 spots to number 8. Bring Her Back debuts at number 9. And Hurry Up Tomorrow drops 2 spots to number 10. We lost 2 movies this past weekend, Fight or Flight and Shadow Force. And when we look at my predictions versus the actual performance so far, I picked Lilo and Stitch to be the number 1 movie of the summer. So far, it is. My pick for number 2, How to Train Your Dragon, opens next weekend. Not this Friday, but the following Friday, and I'll be seeing that movie tomorrow night. Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, currently number 3 at the summer box office. I picked it to be the 5th highest grossing film of the summer. Thunderbolts, I picked to be the 8th highest grossing film. It's currently at number 2. I did not pick Final Destination: Bloodlines to be on my top 10 summer list, and I think that was a mistake because it's really holding well. I almost did. I should have listened to my instincts and put it on the list, but I didn't. Currently, none of my picks have been eliminated. The 3 that have come out are on the top 10, but I only have 1 in the proper position. The 2025 annual domestic box office for the entire year also has some changes. A Minecraft movie is still the highest grossing film of the year. Lilo and Stitch, though, moves up 2 spots to number 2 at $278.9 million. That moves Sinners and Captain America: Brave New World down 1 spot each. Thunderbolts remains at number 5. Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning moves up to number 6. Final Destination: Bloodline stays at number 7. Dogman moves down 2 spots to number 8. Snow White moves down 1 to number 9. And The Accountant 2 rounds out the top 10. And this is the 2025 worldwide box office. Of course, Ne Zha 2 remaining the top grossing film of the year at $2.2 billion. A Minecraft movie, it's looking like it's not going to get to $1 billion, but it's going to be close. It's at $946.4 million. Lilo and Stitch moves up 3 spots at $610.8 million. That bumps Detective Chinatown 1900 and Captain America: Brave New World down to numbers 4 and 5. Thunderbolts is now at number 6. Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, though, is closing in on Thunderbolts. It's at $353.8 million. Sinners moves down to number 8. Final Destination: Bloodlines moves up to number 9. And Snow White is on the precipice of elimination. It drops down 2 spots to number 10. So that's what's going on at the box office. Quickly, let's check in on the world of streaming, and we will start with the latest numbers from Netflix. We'll get new ones later today, but these are the numbers for May 19th through the 25th, and the most watched program on Netflix was Sirens, which is a series from Molly Smith Metzler, the creator of Made. It's a show about the allure of wealth, starring Millie Alcock, Megan Fahey, Julianne Moore, and Kevin Bacon. It brought in about 16.7 million views in its debut week. Secrets We Keep moves down to 2nd place. American Manhunt, Osama bin Laden, moves down to 3rd place. Fear Street, Prom Queen, debuts at number 4 on the list, bringing in 10.67 million views. Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, which is of course not a Netflix original, is still in the top 5 at 8.71 million views. Nona's is at number 6 at 8.42 million views. Untold: The Fall of Brett Favre debuts in 7th place at 6.85 million. Fred and Rose West, A British Horror Story, and Exterritorial are 2 holdovers at numbers 8 and 9. And then the film Instant Family rounds out the top 10 with 5.35 million views. And Sirens had one of the best debuts for a new series this year at 16.73 million views. That's 5th place behind Zero Day, Missing You, Adolescence, and then American Murder, Gabby Petito, which had the best debut so far of a Netflix series with 31.3 million views in its debut week. Looking at the most watched Netflix shows so far this year, Adolescence is number 1 with Squid Game Season 2 at number 2. 0 Days in 3rd place, American Murder, Gabby Petito is in 4th place, and Missing You is in 5th place. The Night Agent 2, American Primeval, and Running Point are numbers 6, 7, and 8. The Tina Fey series, The Four Seasons, Season 1 cracks the top 10. Maybe this is why it got that quick pickup for Season 2 with 33 million views. And Cassandra moves down to number 10. Squid Game Season 1 moves off of the list as far as most watched shows so far this year. Let's take a look now at the Nielsen streaming numbers. Now, these are domestic numbers only, not global like we just saw with Netflix, and they take about a month for Nielsen to get to us. So this is for April 28th through May 4th, and we'll start with the top 10 movies streaming that week. This was the debut week of Extraterritorial, which was number one. It didn't see the huge numbers that we saw in the Netflix global numbers, so there was obviously a big international audience for that movie, but it brought in 12.78 million hours watched. Havoc is down at number 2. Another Simple Favor debuted on Amazon Prime Video at 6.65 million hours watched, so solid but not spectacular. The movie Paul debuts at number 4 at 5.7 million hours watched, followed by The Equalizer 2. This is the beginning of the month, so often whatever is added to Netflix will make this top 10. Then we have a bunch of holdovers rounding out the top 10. Conclave, again largely I think fueled by real life events, is at number 6. Moana 2 is at number 7. A Dog's Way Home is at number 8. Despicable Me 4 is at number 9. And The Accountant is at number 10. These were the most watched streaming shows for April 28th to May 4th. You remains at number 1 at 29.7 million hours watched, followed by the debut of The Four Seasons at 21.65 million hours watched. Grey's Anatomy and Bluey are at numbers 3 and 4. Those are steadfast shows here on this top 10. The Last of Us on Max is at number 5. It'll be interesting to see how these numbers do because we are now post the big plot twist in this latest season. Andor put up another series best number and was the 6th most watched streaming show in the US at 13.6 million hours watched, followed by SpongeBob SquarePants returning to the list at number 7, The Rookie on Hulu returning to the list at number 8, NCIS at number 9, and The Handmaid's Tale rounding out the top 10. And The Four Seasons had one of the best streaming debuts for a new series in the US so far this year. It comes in behind Zero Day and The Residents at number 3 with 21.65 million hours watched. That bumps American Primeval down to number 4 and Ransom Canyon down to number 5. And when we look at the top 20 streaming shows for April 28th to May 4th by watch time per available episode, so basically total amount of hours streamed divided by number of episodes available, The Four Seasons comes out on top at 2.71 million hours watched per episode for 8 episodes. Then we have The Eternaut, which is a short-run series, only 6 episodes. That's why it's harder for it to break the overall top 10. But it brought in 1.31 million hours per episode. The Last of Us comes in at just over 1 million hours per episode. Mobland and Ransom Canyon are at numbers 4 and 5. Battle Camp is at number 6. Good American Family is at number 7. Andor is at number 8 with 18 episodes. Remember, this spans both season 1 and season 2 at 760,000 hours watched per episode. You is in 9th place, and Black Mirror is in 10th place. And speaking of Black Mirror, when we look at the most watched original streaming series of 2025 here in the US, according to Nielsen, it is now the 10th most watched original series of the year. It actually drops Adolescence off of the list. Remember, that's Netflix's most watched show this year. Again, that shows that there was a massive international audience for that show as well as domestic. The rest of the top 10 basically remains the same. The Residents is now in the top 5 at 98.6 million hours watched, coming in behind Severance, The Night Agent, Squid Game, and Reacher. And that's what's happening in the world of streaming. Before we go, though, I wanted to give you a heads up on a few things that you might want to check out in theaters and at home this coming week. First of all, on Thursday, after years of being in kind of a no man's land regarding the rights to the film, Dogma is returning to theaters for its 25th anniversary celebration, although I think that was technically last year, remastered in 4K. So if you haven't seen Kevin Smith's film, and many people haven't because it's been largely unavailable, you can check it out in theaters again starting on Thursday. Ginny and Georgia Season 3 also debuts on Netflix this Thursday, and The Accountant 2 hits Amazon Prime Video on Thursday. So if you didn't catch it in theaters, you can catch it on Amazon Prime this upcoming week. Then on Friday, Ballerina from the World of John Wick hits theaters in wide release. You will see a review for that tomorrow evening here on the channel as soon as the embargo has been lifted. Also hitting theaters is The Ritual, which stars Al Pacino and Dan Stevens as the allegedly real exorcists in the story that The Exorcist was based on. So yet another Exorcist movie, but this one has Al Pacino. Also in many theaters nationwide is Don Da Don Evil Eye, which features the finale of Season 1 and then the first 3 episodes of Season 2. I believe this has been kind of a breakout anime hit, so you can check out the beginning of this second season in many theaters, not all of them around the country. In limited release this upcoming weekend is Dangerous Animals, about a woman who tries to escape a serial killer played by Jai Courtney who wants to feed her to sharks. Shudder is helping to distribute this film, which means you'll probably be able to catch it on that streaming service in the near future. In limited release, The Life of Chuck begins its rollout. It'll be going out to more and more theaters in the next couple weeks. This is directed by Mike Flanagan. It stars Tom Hiddleston, and it's based on a story by Stephen King. It won the Audience Award at the Toronto Film Festival, which is usually a very good sign for the quality of the movie. I'm looking forward to seeing this one when I can and bringing you a review here on the channel. And then finally on Friday, debuting on Hulu here in the US and on Disney Plus internationally, we have Predator: Killer of Killers, which is an animated movie from Dan Trachtenberg, who directed Prey and is directing Predator: Badlands. So he is all in on the Predator franchise. Then on Saturday, this is kind of a unique event. George Clooney is currently starring in a version of Good Night and Good Luck on Broadway, where he takes the role of Edward R. Murrow, which was played by David Strathairn in the original film. And it will be live streamed to CNN live from Broadway on Saturday night. I believe this is the first time that a Broadway show has been live streamed to television while it was still running on Broadway. So if you wanted to check that out, you can see it on CNN this Saturday night. And then on Sunday, speaking of Broadway, the Tony Awards will air on CBS, hosted by Cynthia Erivo. And that's what I've got for you this week from the road. Be sure to stay tuned right here. As I said, I'm going to have my review of Ballerina tomorrow evening, as well as my review of How to Train Your Dragon next week, and the latest in movie news, reviews, box office, and more. Until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you then. Bye.